Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record, whether you're here in the Cayman Islands or whether you're listening overseas via the web. And if you're listening overseas via the web and you're in the Northeast and all of those other places in the U.S. where there is snow, I say to you, if you're in New York City and my friends over there, jump on Cayman Airways and come to sunny, warm Cayman Islands. If you're in other parts of the United States, then catch an American airline, United, Continental, whatever. Make your connections to Cayman Airways and come to warm, sunny Grand Cayman or Cayman Islands, because you can go to the BRAC and you can go to Little Cayman as well. So if you're listening overseas, those are my suggestions, to you. There are many of you who have friends and family over here, so you need not worry about where you're going to stay. You need not worry. You don't have to worry about spending money on hotel accommodations. You can spend that money otherwise and leave that in our economy. So my good friends over in New York, the Forbes, get on that flight and come on over to Grand Cayman. So, For the Record, of course, is a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and it is designed specifically for you. It is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. And of course, I am your host, Orit Connor, and you're always welcome to join me on For the Record every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Our phone lines are always open. And there is always someone there waiting to take your call, usually in the form of Miss Susan Watts and that beautiful voice. You can call us on our toll-free number, which is provided courtesy of Lime, and that toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 or 949-6990. And, of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then you can email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. I also want to remind you that For the Record is brought to you by Seagrape Secretarial Services. They are located at Unit Number 2, Grand Plaza on Howard Street in Georgetown. Their telephone numbers are 326-9953 and 924-8927. They provide quality, professional, and affordable service, and that service is guaranteed because at Seagrape Secretarial Service, there is no job too small for them to undertake. I want to say this morning that we have the pleasure of having Minister Wayne Panton with us this morning as well. And Minister Panton, good morning and welcome back to For the Record again.
Good morning, OC. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And let me say a very warm good morning to all of our residents in our lovely Cayman Islands.
Okay. If I may, before we start talking about financial services, just want to go through some of the headlines, today. Landfill catches fire again. And I just hope that this is not again used as a political football for those who are advocating for the landfill to be moved from its present location to any other location until such time as the government receives the report and recommendations from the committee that has been established to look at the landfill issues. and waste disposal issues as well. Maritime chief faces assault charges. Since that is something that is being dealt with in the courts, we will not comment on it, and we normally don't get involved on For the Record for with these issues. We also see where the political assistant to the premier has been, released as well from his job. Again, we're not going to comment, on that because, again, there are certainly more interesting stories that we can talk about and things that we feel that can be promoted more of the Cayman Islands. Not to say that these issues are not important, but there is a time and a place for everything, and the time is not now, and the place, For the Record, is not the place at this point in time to discuss those. Let's talk about some positive things as well. We had in the Scouts movement and the Girls Guiding movement, we had our Founders Day ceremony yesterday in West Bay at the John Gray Memorial Church. A beautiful service where all of our youngsters participated in those events. And this week is Scout Week for the Scouting movement as well. There will be a basketball contest. There will be a campfire on Friday night. We have something called Baba Job, where our scouters go out and do work. Two scouters will be at the governor's residence doing some work. We encourage all of you to offer scouters some work on Baba Job Day, because in the scouting movement, we don't get things for free. We are encouraged to earn whatever we get. So again, a beautiful service yesterday. I want to thank all of those who were involved in that as well. Looking at other articles in the Compass, Chamber wants local hiring commitments, and that is good. And I see here where the president, Mr. Barabodden, has talked about several issues. And what is heartening in this is that he's not only talking about businesses, because we always talk about the Chamber and its representation of its membership. Only last Friday we were discussing employment here on For the Record with Mr. Steve McFeel and Mr. Christopher Saunders, and we talked about the Chamber. But and again here, it is really heartening to see that they're not only talking about their businesses, but the employment of locals as well. So they have brought a balanced approach towards employment in the Cayman Islands and hiring and the use of local businesses in the Cayman Islands. So that is good to know. Yesterday morning, one of our cycling buddies, we normally ride at 5 o'clock in the morning, and he was due to come out, was going to probably leave home at 4:45, got a BBM message from him saying that he would be unable to make it again. And why? Because they had to chase two suspects from their complex. I'm not sure whether or not they were trying to break into apartments or break into vehicles. I have heard several other stories about break-ins, not only of people's homes, but of vehicles as well. And if we're starting to see an upward trend in this again, then I say to the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, it is something that we need to look into right away and see if we can't apprehend the perpetrators of these crimes. People, law-abiding citizens, residents, visitors of the Cayman Islands have the right, the legal right, to live without the threat of being robbed either on the street or in their homes, or having their properties burglarized as well. So again, something that we want to look out for in the Cayman Islands. And if we start to see a trend happening, then let's address it. And if you see something, say something. With those few words, Minister Panton, again, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. Cayman Islands has been featured in the news most recently. We had a lot of talk about the statement made by Ed Miliband, the leader of the Labour Party in the United Kingdom, and his intention to write a letter to the leaders of the overseas territories in relation to the beneficiary register that he was talking about. I'm not sure whether or not that letter has been received yet. Uh, at on one of our shows, we hadn't seen at that point in time your response, but since that we saw it and we did read portions of your response as well. But looks like the Cayman Islands may feature prominently in the elections that are supposed to take place on the 7th of May of this year in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, well, see, thanks for mentioning that. Certainly, it is an issue that we have to be concerned with. I don't know. I hope that we're not going to feature that prominently, but it is certainly an issue that is being pushed by a lot of the NGOs and non-governmental organizations. The charitable organizations seem to have developed this as an issue over the years. They seem to think that that those financial centers are the cause of reductions in donations to them, and the cause of corruption and all sorts of unfortunate things that exist in other countries, perhaps developing countries. So the focus is on, and the thinking is that if we have a register of beneficial ownership that is open to the public, that means the public and the press and these NGOs are going to be able to connect dots and point out people that are involved in this sort of activity and stop it. I think that ignores the reality that we have for the almost 15 years now had in place a system which requires us to identify and know who our clients are, know who our customers are, and have due diligence information, have verified information as to who the beneficial owners are of the entities which are set up in Cayman. Now, no rule is ever going to, and no law is ever going to prevent someone who really wants to put a lot of effort into it from doing something wrong. But we have a system in place which I think certainly exceeds what the UK is promoting at the moment in terms of their proposed beneficial ownership register. We verify the information, they're not verifying it. It's basically an honest system with them in terms of their proposed register that they've set out in their new Small Business Enterprises Bill that's going through Parliament at the moment. But that is an issue that is being pushed by these NGOs, and it is an issue that has become the subject of the political rhetoric. Hence, you see Ed Miliband's comments. And of course, I think just about all of the overseas territories and the Crown dependencies have responded, I think, appropriately, pointing out the relevant facts. So we're going to continue to have challenges like this in our financial services industry, both on the business side and on the regulatory side in terms of perception, but we continue to meet those challenges. We continue to adapt. We continue to make sure that we are at the leading edge. Our challenge is to make sure we're not too far in front. We are a small country. We don't have the ability. We can't afford to step out there and say we're going to be the leading edge, or we're going to be in front of the pack of everybody else in terms of regulation, and we're going to promote something that isn't a global standard. With the hope, perhaps, that it does become a global standard and be able to endure the cost of that. If it doesn't, we are not in that position. But our challenge and our responsibility is to make sure that we are right there with everybody else, meeting internationally accepted global standards. And that's where we have been, and that's where we are currently still.
Okay. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Art Connor. I have in the studio with me this morning, our guest is Minister Wayne Panton, and we're talking about financial services in the Cayman Islands and some of the challenges that the Cayman Islands face internationally as far as financial services are concerned. Please stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Art Connor, and my guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Wayne Patton, who's the Minister for Financial Services, Commerce, and the Environment. We're talking about issues relating to financial services, but we will also talk about commerce and the environment as well. Minister Patton, most recently, Caledonian Bank has been featured prominently in the news, not only here in the Cayman Islands, but also in the United States, as well. When these things do occur, how much damage does it do to Cayman's reputation?
Well, see, let me say that is an extremely unfortunate situation. I feel very, very badly for everyone involved, but particularly the employees and the certainly the Cayman-based depositors, but all depositors of a financial institution like that in Cayman. I think in terms of the question, the impact depends on a lot of circumstances, how much coverage it gets, how much take-up it gets internationally. But certainly, it is something that doesn't add any nice glossy sheen to our image. It appears that this particular issue hasn't had a lot of international coverage. There are certain media sites that cover this sort of thing, typically in the U.S., which I think it has featured on, but I haven't seen any real coverage in the broader press internationally. So I suppose if there is some benefit, then perhaps that is one. But the issue for us is more the local impact, the impact on the staff, the employees, the impact on those, particularly those local depositors, but obviously all depositors, as I said, and creditors of the bank. It's an extremely unfortunate situation, and one which I think there's a perception that perhaps our regulator, who issued a statement, the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, issued a statement indicating that they were reviewing the bank over a period of time. I think there is a unfortunate conclusion from that this event means that they somehow let it happen and didn't take steps to prevent it from happening. I think the reality is that there was a number of issues going on, a number of concerns that were being reviewed, and it's not an unusual thing. The regulator deals with many banks, many regulated institutions, not just banks, on a daily basis, and there may be issues from time to time that they want to see some improvement on, see some issues addressed, and this is one of those things that doesn't relate to Cayman Islands law specifically. This was an allegation and evidence obviously produced to the U.S. court that there was a breach of United States securities laws. And obviously they satisfied, the Securities and Exchange Commission satisfied the court in the U.S. that there was at least sufficient prima facie evidence to warrant this injunction, which had been granted by the court in relation to some significant assets of the bank that were held through correspondent banks within the U.S. And of course, that then led to an inability for the bank to meet depositors' withdrawal requests, or at least it was anticipated that would be the case. So effectively, I think the bank took a preemptive step of closing their doors, but within the same day, our monetary authority also appointed a controller. And that is obviously a responsible thing to do in those circumstances, to try to make sure, because their primary focus at that time is going to be um, the interests of the depositors and the interests of creditors of the bank. So I think their actions in that respect have been appropriate. But the whole thing is a very unfortunate situation.
Yeah. And as far as the monetary authority, you did mention the fact that they did, step in, and not only that, but there was also a court challenge to the actions of the monetary authority, and that was upheld by the courts here as well. Now we also see where the you mentioned the concern of the staff here, and I saw a statement in today's paper where it is said that the staff will be paid according to their contractual agreements. They will continue to be paid, which is something that is good. But obviously, there's going to be some loss somewhere at some point in time. Someone is going to lose.
Well, it is going to have a negative impact in a broad sense and in a narrow sense. Certainly, we are beyond the question of whether having appointed a controller, it's possible to keep the institution going. I think what they're doing, they've formally put the bank into liquidation. So that means, and the licenses for Caledonian Securities and Caledonian Bank have been revoked by the regulator. So that means that that's going to be the end, essentially, of those two businesses in Cayman. What the liquidator is going to be doing is trying to sell the assets of the bank and the securities company to realize as much money as they can, convert that into liquid cash to be able to meet the demands of depositors and creditors. In terms of the court action you mentioned, there was first the application by the Monetary Authority to appoint the controllers. Then there was, I think, the following day there was an attempt by the bank, the shareholders of the bank, the principals of the bank, to have their own liquidator appointed. And I think our Chief Justice very rightly concluded that there was once the power had been exercised by the regulator to appoint a controller, there was no longer the power by the shareholders to go ahead and appoint their own liquidator. So that was what the various issues were in connection with that, and then of course the controller then went on to apply subsequently for a liquidation order, which is a court supervised liquidation, and we are where we are with that. I'm optimistic that that there will be some reasonable resolution of the various competing interests. But obviously, as I said, there is going to be a negative impact. It's in liquidation, so while staff will be required to continue the operations while the liquidators are liquidating and getting in the assets and converting them and meeting expectations of depositors and creditors. That's a finite period of time.
Right. Ultimately,
right?
they will
Yeah.
have to find. They will
Right.
have to find
So
jobs.
so it is a challenge, and that's something that I hope that the principals, those involved with the bank, and certainly on the government side, we will try to assist in any way that we can.
Okay. We have about 3 minutes left before we go to a time check, but we can start our next conversation and talk about the National Conservation Law and where we're at with the National Conservation Law now, Mr. Panton.
Yeah, we are. I think everyone should be familiar now that we have implemented the initial steps of it to set up the what's called the National Conservation Council, which is the body which effectively administers the law. And I think people will also remember that this body, the law, requires the meetings of this body to be held in the public,
Public, yes.
are open to the public. So we've had at least two formal meetings now, which have been open to the public, and they are working on the next implementation steps for the national conservation law. At the moment, I am about to take forward one paper dealing with the implementation of the next relevant sections of the law. Um, and there's another paper as well which deals specifically with the environmental impact assessment regulations, which are required under the law. So I'm anticipating that in the coming between this month and next month we will have a significant portion of the law in effect, and a lot of the groundwork, a lot of the foundation put in place in terms of the necessary regulations and the administrative backbone so that we can move forward. So they've been working very hard. I want to commend the members of the National Conservation Council for their efforts in this respect.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrit Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Wayne Panton, who's the Minister responsible for Financial Services, Commerce, and the Environment. We're going to take a news break at this point in time. When we come back, we will continue our discussion about the National Conservation Law. Please stay tuned. We will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where we're having a conversation with the Honorable Wayne Panton, who's the Minister for Financial Services, Commerce, and the Environment. When we took the break for the news, we were talking about the National Conservation Law. We want to talk some more about that. We want to talk about the membership of the council. I think it's called the
National Conservation
National
Council.
Conservation Council. But before we do that, I'm made to understand that we have a caller online, so we're going to take that caller now. Caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. O'Connor.
Good morning, Amjad. How are you?
I'm all right, and good morning to the Honorable Mr. Banton.
Good morning, Amjad. Pleasure
How
to
are
hear
you
from
doing,
you.
sir?
Not too bad, thank you. I hope you're as fine as well.
Yes, thank you. First, Mr. O'Connor, I want to say that I admire Mr. Banton, for what he do. I think there is good things as Minister Banton do, and there is a good result always in financial. I think everyone, the first time when he become minister, do right and do wrong, but I think so far I see Mr. Banton is doing a good job. A reason I call today, and before I speak about the issue I call about, I want to say just a small notice about this fire happened in Georgetown landfill. I think, so far many fires happen, and it seems this fire it don't happen by itself, and there is somebody who doing that for a motivated reason. I think the police should start investigate why those fires and who motivated and who doing those fires and why it is being done.
But Amjad, if you the article in the paper today, and I think the acting fire chief, or whether he's acting or he's there in an advisory capacity, Mr. Roy Grant talked about the combustion that takes place underground. So there is no doubt that these fires do flare up. I mean, I personally myself had suspicions at times in terms of when these fires started, whether or not people wanted to bring attention to the dump and by starting the fires. But it is, I would say that it is safe to say that these are underground combustions that take place.
Yeah, but you see, I give you example. In my country, we have 8 million people. We have the biggest, largest dump in one part of the desert, which bigger than Georgetown landfill, maybe a million times.
Mm-hmm.
And So far I never read or hear about one, incident like this. In It is very suspicion that to happen all these fires in short periods of time. But I leave it like that. Um, the reason I called today really because the minister, a sitting minister of cabinet, is um, well respected by me and others in the society is there. I called today to demonstrate against the decision of our Honorable Premier to dismiss Kenneth Bryan. I think it is unfair decision. And I want Mr. Banton to carry our demonstration and our voice to the Honorable Premier because that decision being taken that make one Caymanian more one Caymanian who have a wonderful children and wonderful family lose his job. Could anyone get into a small issue like this and put in a require leave? There's a lot of people being put in require leave for greater reasons than Mr. Bryan reason. And I think it is not right, to make one more Caymanian out of work and to provide for his family. I think we, um, in general, I noticed there is an upset society and upset people in Cayman today for what happened to Mr. Bryan. I think this society is a small, Cayman is a small society, and we know what is the reasons and why Mr. Bryan being dismissed. It is not the issue of that case. I think it is bigger than that case. I don't want say, I don't want mention, but everyone listening to me today in the radio know what this issue and who behind pushing the premier to dismiss Mr. Bryan. I think it is unfair. It is not right, and I think the government should um, fix that mistake they done. And it is not wrong the premier to fix that mistake and put back Mr. Bryan in even provide for him a job or to provide for his children and for his family.
Hmm.
It is unfair how this Caymanian being treated, and I think this government needs to think a million times before they dismiss a Caymanian and make more Caymanians unemployed.
Yeah, caller, there is a saying that justice delayed is justice denied, and it appears as if his case will not be heard before August. That is appalling in itself, unless it is a situation where his lawyers have asked for the case to be heard at that point in time. But that is a long way off. And when you look at the premier's statement, he speaks about the fact that he has been, without an assistant for a period of time now, and it will continue at least until August when the case goes to trial. What do you think about the court system, the legal system, the calendar that are set up? We see some people, for instance, 5 years after they're charged, that their cases are finally resolved, they're acquitted, but the damage has already been done.
Yeah, I think, Mr. O'Connor and Honorable Minister, I think the great example, this poor, work permit board, this lady, which been dismissed for 5 years, damage her life, damage her reputation by government, by by accusation is not correct, not true. For 5 years, she have to suffer, and then what? She lose her job, she lose her reputation, she lose her life, and it is not fair how being and who those victims, Mr. Bryan and this lady is Caymanians. Always why we see that the person who is non-Caymanian when he is under such cases, some of them they just carry their passport and jump in the plane and they gone, and we have to search for them, and we have to go Switzerland to find them and bring them back and then give them money, legal aid. How in the world we treat our people in our country that way. Maybe I'm foreigner, and a lot of people don't consider me from this country. That's fine, but I feel it is unfair, unfair how every government, I'm not speaking about this government, every government in this country treat Caymanians.
Well, in politics, there are always some hard decisions that have to be made. They're not easy. But I ask you to leave us there, caller. Again, thanks for your viewpoint. Certainly quite interested. And you mentioned the fact that you're not Caymanian, but there are a lot of Caymanians out there who feel also that you do what many Caymanians don't do, which is get up there and speak their mind and express themselves. So thank you very much. We have another caller online. Caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Hi, good morning to both of you, gentlemen.
Good morning, Ms.
Good
Lorna.
morning.
How are you?
All right. This is Lorna Bush. And whilst I know this is not the real reason for the minister being on, you just got sidetracked there a bit. And it's very important. I think people need to realize that the situation with Kenneth Bryan, Kenneth was a political assistant, not a civil servant. And, it's a whole different environment. If he's appointed by the premier to go out there and do work in the community, et cetera, to help the party, he would not be viewed in the same light as, I think you made reference to a civil servant who was waiting 5 years to be brought to trial and remained unpaid. Two completely different situations. 5 years waiting for a political assistant, which is a political appointment, completely different than an immigration officer being waiting for a trial. So I just wanted to hopefully, that people will understand, even though it's not a good situation, you'll understand that it's a completely different set of rules.
Yeah, but my point was, their caller, that in relation to the court case going all the way until August, for allegedly assaulting a police officer, there must be something somewhere in the court system that these situations can be resolved much earlier than that.
Absolutely. And I stand with Peter Pollock on his positions with this whole thing with the judiciary and scheduling. But that would be a completely different topic for a different day. Let Mr. Panton carry on with his conservation or speaking about the dump, if that's why he was there. So that's all. I just wanted to make that brief statement. But let's not go down to the court system. That's another disgrace all by itself.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Lorna. You have a great
Bye-bye.
day.
Thanks, Ms. Lorna.
We have another caller in line. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hello?
Yes, hello, good morning. Can you turn your radio down, please?
Hello?
Yes, hello. Can you turn your radio down, please?
I'm not standing by a radio at all.
Oh,
I'm standing
okay.
next to a light. I'm standing next to a light pole.
There must be a radio on top of that light bulb, Quincy. I was just getting some feedback.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
No, I'm not by a radio. As I said, I'm standing next to a light pole. I'm too obese to actually climb it, or I would probably go on the top and shout from the top of the light pole, but I'm not able to do so. How are you this morning, you and your distinguished guest?
I'm fine, Quincy, and I hope you are the same.
I am. I'm very thankful. I have an attitude of gratitude. Very thankful. I would like to talk about the Mr. Kenneth Bryan issue, as I think it is relevant at this time that we turn our focus to unemployment in general, but particularly as it relates to young persons. It is a crying shame, I think, what's happening with Mr. Bryan. This young man has a pending court case. The verdict is not yet in. He has not been found guilty or not guilty, or he hasn't been acquitted. But I understand that the country's premier would want to perhaps shy away in that he's not looking for any sort of negative light. Mr. Kenneth Bryan, who was a political aspirant in the 2013 run, is my age. We went to school together. We did homework together. And he's a father of two children and a wife. So he's going to find himself unemployed, joining the long list of other young Caymanians who's unemployed. What can be done? What can be done? Yes, we need to look at the issue of the dump. We have a lot of environmental issues that needs addressing. I concur. But unemployment of Caymanian people, the list continues to grow. It is time the government addresses this issue now, or it will get worse. Read my letter in today's Cayman Compass about unemployment. How I end it, talking about either an insurrection or we leaving the country, is how I feel. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you very much, Quincy. Thank you.
Thanks, Quincy.
Any comments, Mr. Panton, on all of those
No,
comments?
I mean, I can't really add more than I think you've done a great job outlining the factual position, and certainly I can't add any more than what the Premier did in his response to several of the media houses that appear to have contacted him on it. It is an unfortunate situation, and personally have known Kenneth for a long time. I know his wife, know his family, and they're all lovely people. But these are circumstances, and it's not simply a question of is he being terminated or was he terminated because of his possible guilt or not. It seems, and again, just to be clear, this was a decision of the Premier. This is his appointment. It's not a government. He's not a government employee.
Yes.
Um, but it seems, from his perspective, to be a decision purely of practicality. I need to have somebody on the ground working, and in the circumstances, I don't feel that this will work. And you're right. We shouldn't have this period of time to resolve an issue like this. And I probably personally was disappointed that he was charged at all in the circumstances. But then I am the first to say I don't have all of the facts either. So we can all stand back and criticize a lot of things, but we're not always privy to all the facts.
Certainly, folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor, and my guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Wayne Panton, who is the Minister responsible for Financial Services, Commerce, and the Environment. We're going to take a short break. We will be back, and we will be talking more about relevant issues that will definitely affect you. Please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where we are joined in our studio by the Honorable Wayne Panton, who is the Minister responsible for Financial Services, Commerce, and the Environment. And I must also add, he's one of the MLAs who represents the District of Georgetown. No, sorry, the District of Bordentown.
I wasn't going to let you make that mistake.
Put you in Georgetown, getting to single member constituencies. Who represent the District of Bordentown in their legislative assembly. We're talking earlier before we took those calls about the National Conservation Council, and when we look at Schedule 2 in the National Conservation Law, it talks about the composition of the council, and it says that the council shall consist of the following voting members, so they're all voting members: the director, or his nominee from the Department of the Environment, the Deputy Director of Research in the Department of the Environment, the Director of the Department of Agriculture or his nominee from the Department of Agriculture, the Director of Planning or his nominee from the Department of Planning, a person nominated by the National Trust and appointed by the Cabinet, and 8 persons appointed by the Cabinet, at least 4 of whom shall have relevant scientific or technical expertise. And it also says in appointing persons under the law, the Cabinet shall appoint at least 1 person from each of the following districts: West Bay, Georgetown, Cayman Bracken, Little Cayman, Bordentown, North Side, and East End. So it seems as if we have, quite, a balance there. And we would hope that in the appointment of the members representing the districts, that those are people who can relate to the across-the-board constituency in their district, so that the little fisherman out there will know, what the law is all about. The person who during crab season goes out there and catches crabs, or wants to get a few wilks for for dinner, will know about it. So we would hope that we have that cross section of representation on the council itself.
Yeah, I think that's right, OC. And that's certainly the approach that we have generally taken. I mean, the law um, requires some people to have some relevant experience in relation to conservation and some technical qualifications and stuff. So we can have up to two members who don't have any. I think actually four members who don't have any at all. But I in general, when we were looking at the appointments for the districts, we tried to take the approach of getting people who were going to have the ear, going to understand the issues, going to be very familiar with their district, and what matters to the residents of that particular district. In fact, when I was working out the potential appointees to recommend to my colleagues in cabinet, I wrote to all of the MLAs in the other districts that aren't represented on the government bench. So I wrote to the three members, including the leader of the opposition in West Bay, and I wrote to the member from East End. I wrote to the member from North Side, and I certainly, what I did was I proposed to them someone that had been considered, and to get their feedback, and both in respect of that person and as to whether they had any alternate suggestions. And in some cases, I got response. I didn't get any responses from the three members from West Bay. They say that they didn't get the communication. I don't know. I think I satisfied them that I sent it to the correct addresses. But I did get a response from the member from East End, and I did get a response from the member from North Side. And in fact, in both of those cases, their views were taken into account, not necessarily as to who they suggested. I can't recall whether they actually. No, actually, the member from East End did suggest one alternate. I can't recall whether the member from Northside suggested a specific alternate, but they both certainly expressed their views as to what the general qualification should be, and they were taken into account. So I think in both cases we ended up with different people than we initially were suggesting to reflect those views. In fact, we have the member representing Northside fairly recently resigned for health reasons, and so we have to deal with an appointment of a replacement for Northside. So again, I will go back to the member from Northside with a suggested alternate replacement, and see what his views are, as I did with the original appointments.
Okay. Now, we also see here that the appointed members will hold office for a term of 2 years, but they're also eligible for reappointment. Do you think that 2 years, in terms of continuity, is sufficient?
Well, I think it's a reasonable compromise. There were some provisions. Obviously, I didn't start with a clean slate in terms of looking at this piece of legislation. Right. As you know, this had been kicked around for probably 10 years.
Yes.
So
way overdue.
There were lots of things that had been discussed in some significant detail. So I really took the issues that needed resolution. This wasn't identified as one that needed resolution. I think they had reached the conclusion that perhaps this was a reasonable compromise. I don't know where they started initially, but certainly there are. You can make an argument that a longer term would give you more continuity. But of course, the provision also does say that you're eligible to run again and be reappointed. So it doesn't preclude the ability for the government or the cabinet at the time to basically retain and achieve that continuity that we speak about.
Okay. I believe that the council has, you mentioned earlier that their meetings are open
Open
to
to
the
the public.
public.
Yes.
And they've held, what, 2 meetings so far?
I believe they've held two. I think it's two so far. Definitely two, and maybe I might be missing one, but certainly they've had two public meetings. I think
Seems as if one may have been in September and then the other one in December of 2014.
maybe there's three then, because I think there was one more. There has been one more recent earlier this month, because I remember the press was mentioning to me that he had attended the meeting, and he was explaining the sort of double-edged sword of the thing, that it's great to have it's great for government to put something in place where these meetings are public and open to the public, because it increases transparency, and it allows people to see how decisions are made and what's taken into consideration and whatnot. But on the other hand, you have to attend.
Yes.
You have to sit through these meetings,
yeah.
however long they
Yes,
are.
yes.
So that's the other side of the coin with it. And it was just a offhand comment that this is all great, but then I have to spend the time attending, which is good. I mean, I think, and I think this is one of the things about having this level of transparency and having meetings like this held in the public. It's not the reality, but it's the perception that you're trying to address. In fact, the vast majority of times, if not all the time, decisions that are being made appropriately. They're taking things are taken into context when they should be and not when they shouldn't be. And just having without it being open to the public, people just don't know, and they think, well, if I can't attend, something's possibly going on. But once you can, after a while, you those who are interested will get to the point where they're satisfied that things are going well, and it's only if there's some specific matter that they want to address or hear about will they attend. But it's all good. I think it's. I was very happy to have that provision. I put that provision in the law.
Several years ago, there was always talk about the boards and the remuneration that board members received. And when we look at the schedule here, it says that all administrative expenses incurred by the council in carrying out its functions under the law and allowances shall be paid out of the general revenue of the Cayman Islands. We see more and more where some people are reluctant to give of their time back to the community, back into the country where they live and they have their being. Are the non-governmental members paid for the meetings that they attend, or is this all done for free?
Yes, there is a stipend paid to all of the non-governmental members. It's not a significant amount. I think most of the boards do have provisions for small amounts to be paid, and I think this one is no different. This is left up to cabinet to set what it is. I can't recall the exact details, but I'm pretty sure in thinking that the annual budget for for all of the meetings is less than $10,000 that are anticipated. So it's not a lot of cost. It's somewhere, I'd say probably between 7 and 10, somewhere in that region.
Okay. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orrit Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Wayne Panton, who is the Minister responsible for Financial Services, Commerce, and the Environment, and also the elected member who represents the District of Bordentown in the Legislative Assembly. I also want to remind you that our phone lines are open. We have our toll-free number, courtesy of Lime. That number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 or 949-6990. And of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then you can email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at CANDW.KY. We have one caller online now, so we're going to take that caller. Caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning, Mr. O'Connor, and good morning, the Minister Wayne Panton.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Keith. How are you?
Okay, thank you. I just have a question, Mr. Ponton,
Yes, sir.
concerning the investigation with Caledonian Bank. Is it possible that we're able to have those types of investigations um, as they did overseas, that we're able to nip it in the bud before it goes as far as it did, and then internationally, um, letting people look at the Cayman Islands in a negative way? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Keith. And certainly, I think when you say nip it in the bud as they did overseas, you're referring specifically to the SEC action in relation to Caledonian. Um, I think what in earlier comments I indicated that our regulator had been having discussions about some concerns and some issues. I don't think they specifically related, and I'm pretty sure they didn't relate specifically to those SEC matters initially. But certainly, as the SEC conducted its investigation in relation to the breach of U.S. securities laws, they would have been in touch with our local regulator seeking regulator to regulator cooperation, and that that occurs. That is what they do on a daily basis. There are numbers of cooperative memorandums of understanding and whatnot to facilitate that. But fundamentally, people I think need to understand and recall that this is an issue of a breach of U.S. securities laws, not a breach of Cayman Islands laws, and it is not something necessarily that our regulator would have been aware of initially in whatever reviews they had been conducting. Certainly, once the SEC was in touch with our regulator, then our regulator's position is going to be we're going to assist in whatever the investigations are, and if at some point there's an agreement as to how to proceed between the two regulators, then our regulator may be in fact be the person or the regulator that actually takes some sort of action. In this case, the SEC took their action as they did in the U.S. Because they were seeking to protect the interests of their
U.S.
domestic
right
economy. The allegation is that there was this pump and dump scheme, as they call it, where you have these penny stocks, penny
yes,
shares, and you pretend as if there's a lot of buying activity, and you try to get a lot of interest in make people think that there's a huge market for these shares, and somebody else knows something that we don't, so we have to get in on this action. And then it turns out to all be a sham and valueless, a valueless company and valueless shares. But this is not something that our regulator would really necessarily be aware of. This is specifically an issue that originated with the alleged breach
because
of
they don't
US.
necessarily monitor share activity that's taking place in the U.S. where it is governed. The stock exchanges and stuff like that are all handled by the SEC over there.
Yeah. I mean, our regulator is going to deal with issues locally in relation to the compliance with Cayman Islands law. They're not necessarily aware of the involvement of any business in international transactions until somebody contacts them as an overseas regulator and says, hey, there is an issue we'd like your assistance with.
And so far, no individuals have been named and no indictments in the U.S. have taken place
I don't
so
think
far.
there's been any sort of criminal action being taken in terms of allegations or arrests or anything like that. I don't know if there's anything pending, but I don't know further about those details. But certainly, I think our regulator has acted properly, and I don't think that in this case this was necessarily something that could have been prevented. These types of things, like many crimes, if you have a crystal ball, you'll be able to prevent them. But most of the time, a crime is detected after the fact, not predicted beforehand.
And what's important here is that our local
And we have to
authorities
remember, of course, these are all allegations. These are
exactly
alleged
that's true,
breaches.
alleged, yeah. And what's important is that our local authority and monetary authority here took appropriate action as soon as they were
Absolutely.
in a position
Absolutely.
where they could take some action,
Yes,
and that was
yes,
done.
I think they did act appropriately in the circumstances.
And I think that sends the message, also to the international community that when there is an alleged breach and when it is necessary for legal action to be taken, that our local authorities here are certainly
Absolutely.
prepared to do so.
We are
irrespective.
part of a global environment. You know, we have to have regulated to regulated cooperation. We have to fulfill our international obligations, and I'm satisfied that they have done that entirely in spades. So, this is the U.S. regulator is going to look after their interests, their domestic interests. Cayman's regulator is going to deal with ours. And if anything is pointed out that is wrong, there's going to be cooperation to address it, because fundamentally we are part of a global financial system. If we don't have this kind of cooperation, if it doesn't work properly, it fails not just us in Cayman or not just the U.S., but it fails internationally, it fails globally. We're part of a big system that has to function properly, has to function in accordance with the rules.
Exactly. If I may, I'd like to go back to the whole issue of beneficial ownership, the registry. And you talked about the fact, and in your statement, well, first of all, have we in fact received any official correspondence from Ed Miliband?
Yes, when I issued that statement, we had not received anything.
Okay. Uh-huh.
I think at some point within the intervening period, we did receive it. It wasn't sent to me; it was addressed to the premier.
Uh-huh.
Our premier was off for a short period of time, and at some point during his absence, this letter was received. I have now seen the letter,
and I would say totally unprecedented for the leader of the opposition, who's trying to gain the reins of power in the UK, to take such a bold step.
Yeah, well, it's
to
politically
do that.
motivated.
Yes,
I
it
mean,
is. It is.
You have an election going on, about to happen in the UK in 2 months, and I think he feels that this is an issue. There's the predictions, the polls don't put a lot of distance between
The two.
the competing parties, the opposition and the incumbents, and I think he feels that perhaps this is an issue that could attract the attention of a million or two of their residents and their citizens, and that it could make a difference. So of course he comes out swinging and says, if if Labour wins, this is what Labour is going to do, and we're gonna take a maul and crush this little peanut. But it is largely political rhetoric, and it is largely posturing. The reality of what he's saying, right, is Cayman is rated the same as the UK, rated the same as the US in terms of compliance against international anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism standards, and disclosure of information and transparency. It's rated the same. We're all rated largely compliant, and we're rated ahead of most of the G8 and G20 countries. So what he's really saying is, all of these other countries, and I think the incumbent politicians in the UK, George Osborne, and I can't remember if the Prime Minister specifically said it, but certainly it means that they'd have to go on a blacklist too. You'd have to put most of the G20 on a blacklist if you take the position that he says, that either you have a register in 6 months, or we're going to recommend to the OECD that you get put on a tax haven blacklist. In fact, there is a fourth anti-money laundering directive, fourth anti-money laundering directive, which is the administrative bodies within the European Union have agreed roughly on a draft, and one of the provisions is that they will have central registers and there's a discussion going on about what information will be in the central register. But the principle they're putting forward is that we'll have central registers of beneficial ownership information, and we're gonna have this requirement that this be put in place for all European Union member states within 2 years of the adoption by the EU Parliament of this directive. So what he's saying is, despite the fact that the EU are 2.5 years away from implementing at best, if they do adopt it, because it's probably won't be until September when they get around to adopting it, if they do. They're 2.5 years away from implementing it, but he's going to impose a 6-month deadline on the Cayman Islands and all the other all the other overseas territories and the Crown dependencies.
Definitely political posturing.
It's ridiculous. The assertion is ridiculous. The proposal is ridiculous in the context, you know.
And you said earlier that we, the Cayman Islands, we won't be a guinea pig in terms of anything, going forward. We have certain structures in place now. Bermuda has said the same thing. The Crown dependencies have basically said the same thing. And until there is something that is globally accepted by the international community, including the European Union, that we would not go forward. And I think that is fair. Why should we, the small Cayman Islands, be a guinea pig when we know that there are those out there sometimes, and even us suspect that sometimes our mother country itself are prepared to hang us out there to dry? Why would we go ahead and do something before anyone else does something different than is already in place?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's fine for them to have an aspirational approach and say this is what we would like to have, and for the UK to say we would like to be leading this and trying to promote a new global standard. But the reality is, it is not the current global standard, and the UK has 3 million plus companies. If you aggregate all of the companies amongst all of the overseas territories, you might get half of that, right? Probably not even half. Right? You'd have to stretch it.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if they want to push a standard like that, perhaps that's something that they can afford to do. On the other hand, we perform a very important role in the global financial architecture, and we have clients around the world. There are global citizens. There are people in different regions around the world who are understandably sensitive about privacy issues.
Folks, I want to remind you, you're listening to For the Record. I'm discussing financial services and other issues with the Honorable Wayne Panton, who is the Minister responsible for Financial Services, Commerce, and the Environment. We're going to go to news headlines now, and we will be back shortly for the last segment of our show. Please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, and thank you for joining us here in the studio where we have the Honorable Wayne Panton, who is the Minister responsible for Financial Services, Commerce, and Environment, and also is the MLA elected in the Legislative Assembly to represent the District of Bodden Town. We're talking about the whole issue of a beneficial registry, a register of beneficial owners of companies as registered in the Cayman Islands. And of course, decisions that are taken by the elected government are not decisions that are taken with a whim and a fancy. And certainly the voice of the financial community, Minister Panton, has a lot to do with some of the decisions that you will make when it relates to how they're affected by those decisions.
Absolutely, we'll see. I mean, this government is not involved in gambling. We are out there to understand what the issues are, understand what the concerns are. We have consultations with representatives of financial services, both on a very specific sort of micro level, but on a broader macro level, where we have organizations like Cayman Finance that we work with very closely, who themselves have other members who will feed in perspective, feed in input on particular issues. So we engage in consultation on particular issues. We did a consultation specifically on this question of the beneficial ownership register, and whether, as requested by the UK in 2013, whether that should be in place as a central register, and whether it should be open to the public. The response we had, more than 80%, and this was conducted in early 2014. The response we had was very clear. Our industry and those clients who responded, more than 80% said what we have in place now we think works. We do not want a central public register in place. A public register is not the way to go for us. Obviously, if it's a global standard, then that changes things. If everybody is following the same rule, that changes things. We are certainly not going to be behind, but we can't afford to be out in front on standards which are going to have an impact. As I said earlier, when we left at the break, I was saying clients are concerned about privacy, and for us, we know who the beneficial owners are. The Cayman Islands, the service providers within the Cayman Islands know who the service providers are, and they verify that information to make sure that they're not being fed false information. And what's proposed in the UK right now is an honest system. They're not going to verify it. They're going to ask people to just provide the information. They're only going to ask for information in relation to those who hold 25% or more of the shares in a company. We have our bar set at 10%. So we're going to know more of the beneficial owners of a company, and we're also going to verify that information to be sure that we understand. And our industry rightly has a culture of compliance, and they're very proud of the level of adherence to global standards which have been set by the Financial Action Task Force, which is an offshoot of the OECD, and also the G20 principles acknowledge the types of standards and the level of transparency that we should have in place, and acknowledges that Cayman's system works as an alternate system to a central register approach. So we comply with international standards, and we are not going to go and take a risk. We're not going to gamble with the interests of a very significant aspect of our economy, for the sake of satisfying what somebody in the UK may want or perceive as being attractive to the million or two members of the NGOs in the UK, particularly, who see this as a very significant issue. We are all about ensuring that our standards are prudent, our standards are appropriate, and they comply with international standards. That's what we do, and we do it in spades. And I'm very proud of our industry and how it has responded to that.
While this issue, Minister Pannon, is really not does not directly fall under your remit, last Friday, along with Mr. Steve Macfield and Mr. Christopher Saunders, we had a discussion about employment or unemployment in the Cayman Islands, depending on who you talk to. Some are employed, some people are unemployed. And we see the figures hovering, or we hear figures being thrown out in relation to maybe 2,000 plus persons unemployed in the Cayman Islands. I expressed the view that with such a small number, when you look at the overall employed population in the Cayman Islands, it's an issue that could or should be easily resolved. And I know that is a concern of yours as well, the unemployment situation in the Cayman Islands. Comments on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an agenda item. It's a big priority for the whole government, and certainly for myself as Minister for Commerce and for Financial Services, which is such a large part of our economy and has so many jobs in the economy. It is something that's very significant to me, and It's one of the things that motivates me to push and try to make sure that we defend our financial industry and that we promote our financial industry, more importantly, as much as possible, so that we can generate growth, create additional opportunities for Caymanians. And of course, growth in our economy is, I think, we're never for the foreseeable future going to get away from the need for work permits. But what we have to do fundamentally is make sure that every Caymanian that wants an opportunity, that deserves an opportunity, that is willing to put in the effort, because they've got to play their part, right? They have to play their part. They've got to be contributing. They've got to be willing to learn. They've got to be willing to participate in training programs. They've got to be willing to show up, respond to calls, do what they need to do, because it fails us as a country, it fails us as an economy if we don't. But there are lots of us, and there are lots of young Caymanians that are coming on that I am so proud of their abilities. I am so proud of their determination to play their part. And I think that the future is very good for opportunities within financial services and the broader economy for Caymanians. We do have some issues going on. We don't know. What we do know is that over the last two labor survey periods, the unemployment level has been coming down. Right, it has not been coming down as fast as we would like, but it has been coming down. And one of the decisions we took last year, I think, or was it? It might have been the end of 2013, was prior to that, the labor force survey had been conducted once a year, and the Minister Archer, my colleague, advocated the view amongst the cabinet, and it was accepted and acknowledged that we needed to have, particularly when unemployment is a challenge, we needed to have more information on a more frequent basis than just once a year. So we agreed to do the labor force survey, and we funded it for a twice a year approach. The next one is next month, and I think, or will be released next month. I think they're going to start the labor force survey very, very shortly, perhaps days or within a week or two. They're going to initiate that, and we'll have the results in February, I think. April. That is going to tell us whether the downward trend has continued in terms of unemployment of Caymanians. We hope that that's the case, and I think the sort of gut feeling is that is the case, but we need to have the results of this survey in order to confirm that is the trend. We certainly feel that we need to continue to do more, continue to put in the efforts to try to address that and make sure that our people get as much opportunities. I know there was a lot of comments fairly recently in relation to one indicator that was set out in an article in the Compass, which was that the numbers of work permits had gone up by, I think it was somewhere around 8%. They indicated. I think there was an unfortunate conclusion that means that those jobs that were created were taken by expats. You see, the problem is, you can go to immigration as a member of the public, as a press, even government. We can go there and we can ask, give us the statistics or the numbers of work permits that have been issued over the last year, and show us how much it has increased or decreased. What we cannot do, because we don't track it, is the numbers of Caymanians that may have gotten fill jobs, fill new jobs or retain those. So that is something that I'm trying to address from a perspective of going the next best step and just talking a lot to people in the financial services industry as my area. I know the Minister for Tourism, my colleague, Minister O'Connell, is doing the same thing in relation to tourism. We're trying to talk to the various businesses and understand what the composition of staff looks like in terms of the mix between expats and Caymanians, and also what they see in terms of growth, what they see in terms of opportunities for Caymanians, what approach they're taking in order to make those opportunities available to Caymanians.
I saw some figures when I was doing some research the other day, and it appeared as if in the financial services sector, I think something like about 69% of the jobs in the financial services industry are held by Caymanians.
I think that's right. I know Cayman Finance was also working on that. We had discussed a program a year ago now, and they've been implementing it in stages of trying to ascertain exactly what the opportunities are, how much penetration there is for Caymanians in this particular area, and what opportunities are available. And that percentage is no surprise to me at all. I know most businesses have at least somewhere in the region of 50% or higher. I recently had meetings with two large financial institutions in Cayman, and in both cases, I was actually, while I expected a high percentage, I was actually very, very surprised to find out that close to 95% of their staff are Caymanians.
Wow.
So that bodes very well for Caymanians. I think people need to understand the amount of penetration and the significance this industry is to not just our economy, not just our GDP, but Caymanians.
Caymans in general. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. Sorry. I'm your host, Dorit Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Wayne Panton, who's the Minister responsible for Financial Services, Commerce, and the Environment, and also the elected member for the District of Bordentown, who represents that district in the Legislative Assembly. We're going to go to our final commercial break at this point in time. Please stay tuned as we will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorit Connor, and I have the pleasure of having in our studio with us this morning the Honorable Wayne Panton, who is the Minister responsible for Financial Services, Commerce, and the Environment. So many things that we can talk about, but there's only so many things that we can talk about in 2 hours' time. Also, before we have Minister Panton have his final wrap-up, I want to talk about very briefly about fuel prices in the Cayman Islands. We have seen the price of fuel trending downwards recently. As a matter of fact, there is one service station, and we don't promote any service stations on air, but I'm going to mention this one, Medac, where the price of unleaded regular fuel is now below the $4 mark, whereas there are other stations that are still at $4.25. They're down, I think it's $3.98 per gallon, which is pretty good. That has to bode well for the economy of the Cayman Islands and some parts of the commercial industry as well. Minister.
Absolutely. I think we have been benefiting from the global reduction in oil prices and the oil price market. I think it's around $50 a barrel, or just slightly under $50 a barrel right now, and that has been reflected in lower costs for gasoline globally as a commodity, and certainly in Cayman. Now, we'd like to see it lower here, because we feel that there is still some room there. But either way, it has come down very significantly from where we're at. I think a couple of years ago, it was three or so years ago, it reached its peak of just under $6 a gallon. And the interesting thing for me was that the government at the time, who didn't have any solutions to it, weren't addressing it, although the people were very much feeling it. But today, as the opposition, and during the election campaign, they were saying, "Oh, it's going to be $4. We're going to make it $4 a gallon." Well, I don't know how they were going to do that. And they're still not saying how they were going to do that. But certainly, it is below $4 a gallon now. And I'm not saying that this is directly the result of the actions of the government, other than in relation to CUC, where we took the step of reducing the fuel duty by 25 cents a gallon. So that is having a very positive impact on the CUC bills, and that will be continuing. You're going to see more and more of that in the coming months, assuming that the price of oil doesn't suddenly get volatile and skyrocket back up or something. I think we're going to, and it's so that bodes well for the economy. And I think it's going to, all of these things drive a lot of our costs. So this is a process that's bringing down, and the government is taking actions to participate in that, to help the costs come down, to lower the cost of living for our people, to lower the cost of doing business in our economy, and that helps. That helps businesses. That helps those employees of those businesses as well, because that's what makes our system work.
And speaking of lowering the cost of doing business in the Cayman Islands, some of the smaller companies, there are some that are still struggling, for instance, to pay their trade and business license, some that have been.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, we've addressed that.
okay.
We did last year. We reduced, but last year we eliminated the cost of doing a trade and business license if you are a company with less than 4 employees and an aggregate of. So if you're a micro company and you micro business and you have less than 4 employees or 4 or less, and you have a maximum of 250,000 in aggregate revenues, your cost to get a trade and business license is zero. Right? And I'd like people, I've come across quite a few people who have said, as has some of my colleagues, who said, oh, if, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go and get a trade and business license and either start or restart my small business. And if I could do that, then I think I'd be able to keep moving and things would be a lot better for me. Well, a lot of people, even today, even though we've made so many efforts to try to bring it to the attention of people, a lot of people still don't know, still aren't conscious that you don't need money to get a trade and business license for a micro company. And we've also significantly reduced the cost for companies that are small businesses, that is less than 12 employees and up to 750,000. We discounted the fees by 50% for Georgetown and West Bay. We discounted it by 75% for the rest of the country. The BRAC also gets an additional discount, or the sister islands. Yeah. So we're on top of that. We're trying to support the small businesses, and we're now having budget discussions for the 2015-16 budget. And whereas in the 14-15 we included provisions we've lowered the duty from 22% to 20%. So we took off the 2% that had been added by the previous government. We've addressed the fuel duty for CUC, as I said, and we've addressed the trade and business license fees, and we're looking for the new things now to add on to that.
Okay. Sounds like we need
so
to
it's,
have
it's a lot of positive things that will be coming.
Yeah, sounds like we need to have Raj Kumar Singh back on here to let the people know what's out there, what's available to them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We have one caller who's just getting in right under the wire at this point in time, so let's take that caller now. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. I'll do it quickly as possible.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
To my favorite people.
Thank you.
Anyway, Mr. Pantan, it is so good to hear of all the interesting things that are happening and the things that are going to have been and will continue to improve the life of Caymanians. You're just, 3 months shy of, maybe close to 3 months shy of your 2-year term in office, 2 years of your term in office. And so I think the Caymanian people should be feeling quite good. And I say that because that's just the way I feel from my observations. I think I am pretty much on target when I say things have improved very, very well. And so we are grateful because I give thanks to God every day that, we have individuals there who really are not only capable but willing to take on the challenges. So I just want you to know that this weekend I saw one fine young lady who had gotten a job at the Westin. She was there at the supermarket with her uniform, and she looked good. She was from West Bay, and she was excited about her job. The other one was employed by, I think, Breezes in town, and she too was excited about her job. So
Excellent, excellent.
that's only two people that I saw. So what I'm saying is that whereas I hear individuals who say they're looking for work, I'm also glad to say that just this weekend I was able to learn that. Now, Mr. Connor, Mr. Panton, your time is getting short there on the radio. So just let me say, Mr. Uh, Connor, that I enjoy calling you. You handle your callers with respect and diplomacy. And so thank you for that.
Thank
Have
you
a
very
good day,
much.
gentlemen.
Thanks, Miss Daphne.
Thank you, Miss
You have a
Daphne.
great day too.
Thank you.
Mr. Patton, I guess they say when you're having fun, time goes very
Yeah.
quickly. You're certainly able to handle all of the questions, the queries that our callers may have had, as well. And I want to thank you, and I want to give you final opportunity to wrap up.
Well, thank you very much, OC. It's always a pleasure being on here with you. I think this is probably my second time, so I have not had nearly enough opportunity to come and spend some time with you. But I hope to change that in the future.
Certainly.
Spend more time with you. But yeah, let me just very quickly go back. We talked about the labor force survey, right? There was one done in October. We're getting the results of that very shortly,
Okay.
right? So
okay.
we'll have a number which indicates the results of the labor force survey for October last year. The There is going to be another one done in April. So it'll be a little while before we get before ESO, the Economics and Statistics Office, does their analysis on that and provides that. So that we're going to get indicative trends. But for the first 9 months of 2014, we've had economic growth of about 2.3%, which is more than double what we've had in the last 4 or 5 years, on a consistent basis. Now that hopefully will continue to improve the opportunities that are available to Caymanians for jobs. Unfortunately, with economic growth, any increase in economic activity, sometimes you have businesses that will, or a lot of the times you have businesses that will hold off their hiring, and they'll say, you know what, this is great, this is all good for us, this looks good, but let's wait, let's be conservative, and let's maximize the productivity of our existing staff, our existing employees, before we hire new ones. I think what happens is after a year and a half of sustained improvements in the economy, these companies then start saying, okay, now we're feeling more comfortable. Let's go out there and hire more staff now because we foresee additional growth. All of the financial institutions that I have talked to and many of the businesses that I've had conversations with in Cayman and broader economy are confident. That was one of the things we said we would bring back to the country, bring back to the government, bring back to the economy. And they are willing to make the investments. They're willing to consider hiring new staff. I think we're getting to the point now where that's going to start happening more. And we also have the very considerable number of new big projects that are going to start coming online. We've been going through the required process for a number of the government projects. We can't get away from that. That is the established best practice approach. As frustrating as it is, doing the right thing a lot of times is not the most convenient thing. It is just the right thing.
Yes.
So we are there. We're getting to that point. I think we're going to have a significant layer of additional business on top of where we're at now, and I'm anticipating next year, we'll be looking at closer to 3% economic growth, and that will have translated into businesses feeling more comfortable about hiring additional staff. The institutions that I've talked to, I said are very, very optimistic. They foresee growth, even when you have situations where some people are closing, some people are downsizing, some people are rationalizing their operations. That creates opportunities for yet others to fill that space and to build on that space. And you have, and a number of them have said to us, yes, we've taken on staff from some of these different associations or institutions that have scaled down operations or closed operations, and we're getting business and we're building on that. So there's a lot of positive stuff going on, and we're going to continue to push as a government to try to ensure that the benefits of that are as broad based in our economy, and that our Caymanians, our own Caymanian people, benefit as much as possible from that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pan. And folks, you heard it here on For the Record, Radio Cayman 89.9. You have heard the minister's enthusiasm and optimism about the economy of the Cayman Islands. He should know it better than anyone else because he's the one who has the pulse of the business community as well as sitting in a hot seat in terms of making things happen. I want to, again, remind you that For the Record has been brought to you by Seagrape Secretarial Services. They are located at Unit Number 2 Grand Plaza on Howard Street in Georgetown. Their telephone numbers are 326-9953 and 924-8927. They provide quality, professional, and affordable service, and those services are guaranteed because at Seagrape Secretarial Services, there is no job too small for them to undertake. We also want to welcome a new sponsor on board, LED, and our LED stands for Light Emitting Diodes. They're our new sponsors, and you will hear good things about them as well in terms of how you can save on your electricity bills as well by having efficient appliances, having efficient lighting systems in your homes as well. And I want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't, then you should donate to a worthy charity. We should always think about those who need and not about those who want. And for all of those out there, I want to remind you that this week is Scouts Week for our Scouts. If you have a youngster who you want to join the Scouts Association, you can contact me. My number is 916-0135, and I will give you the contact numbers for Mr. Winston Hale, our Executive Director. We have units in the various districts, Georgetown as well. It's a healthy environment to have your children in, either in the Scouts, which is basically, it's not only for boys, but here in the Cayman Islands, we have a tendency for boys to attend the Scouts and for girls to attend the brigades. So get your children involved in some healthy, beneficial social activity. I want to again thank you for allowing us into your homes, into your offices, into your vehicles as you traverse the roads of Cayman to get to your jobs. Thanks for listening to Radio Cayman. We also welcome you to rejoin, continue to listen to Radio Cayman, and you can then join Sterling Dwayne Ebanks at 12 noon for Talk Today. God bless. Stay safe.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.